you call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. My soul rests in your embrace, for I am yours. You are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Sovereign hand will be my guide. My feet may fail and fear surrounds me. You've never failed, and you won't stop now. So I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of My soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine.
While you're eating lunch, I just wanted to announce we are going to have the Medicare Marketplace. The CCA will be presenting the Medicare Marketplace on October 23rd. So just put that on your calendar, and that will be held in this room. You'll be getting flyers, and we'll be putting it out in the Globe and going on Channel 6. And Dr. Trin will hopefully be with us, but we'll definitely have Irvine Clinical Research, and we'll be bringing a whole host of other speakers. How many of you have been to the Medicare Marketplace? Okay, one. It's last year, Danny Welsh, who founded the CCA, she started it. She started this, and it has been going on for several years. I encourage you to come. Last year we had about 35 vendors for you to visit, and 3 speakers. Alzheimer's Orange County was a big part of the presentation, talking to you about what's new in Medicare. So that's pretty exciting. It's always very helpful to hear it and then to have a resource in there to speak to about any questions you might have. Now, at this point, we're going to bring up, if everybody could just take a seat, we are going to get started on our presentation, Dr. Trin. So let's just let's give a minute before we bring him up on stage. And without hesitation. So how many of you use natural supplements right now? Awesome. Terrific. Then this is I think you'll really enjoy this presentation. Somebody had talked to me a little bit as I was getting the lunch about Dr. Trin, and they wanted to hear his history. So how many of you know Dr. Trin's history? No? Oh. Well, I'd love for him to tell you a little bit about his bio because it's very intriguing, and somebody specifically requested you to hear about it. So let's give Dr. Trin a hand and welcome him on stage right now. Dr. Trin.
Somebody requested that, who heard my story, wanted me to share my story a little bit. And how many of you guys here are veterans? Thank you so much. And if it were not for our veterans, especially our Vietnam veterans, I actually would not be here today. The Vietnam War ended April 30th, 1975. So April 30th, 1975. I was about 5 years old at that time. So on April 29th, I was rescued on a U.S. helicopter in Vietnam. Have you guys ever seen those documentaries of Vietnam with the last days? So that was me. I was a 5-year-old boy at the time. I remember being outside on the runway. I was the oldest of 4 kids. So my sister was 3 years old. My other sister was 2 years old. And my youngest brother was 3 months old. And Mom was with us. And I remember my grandma was with us as well. And I remember the shooting, the bombings, all the mortars going around us, because it was just a day before the end. So they were fighting street to street. They're doing house-to-house shooting. And I remember being around all that during the last days. And I remember, do you guys know what a Chinook helicopter looks like? It's like a little pickle, right? It goes like this, and there's 2 propellers. They were really big. So I remember these Chinook helicopters landing, and we were sitting outside, outdoors, and it was so windy because the propeller was like this, and it was really loud. If you've ever been next to a helicopter, super loud, and we had nothing for ear protection. But I remember the helicopters landing. The back would go down, and a bunch of people run inside, and the helicopter takes off. And then another one would land, and the back would go down, and folks would run inside. And it was like a gray day. It was drizzly. It was kind of light rain. And one helicopter would land in front of us. The back went down, and then we were told it was our turn. So, yeah, so I was 5. I grabbed my sister's hand. She was 3. And we ran toward this big helicopter. And my mom grabbed my other sister's hand, who was 2. And then she had my brother, who was 3 months old, in her other hand. So, you know, we had no luggages. We just, whatever we were wearing, we ran into the back of the Chinook helicopter. I remember there was a serviceman sitting there with a pistol, and I ran into the helicopter. I sat on the left side. There was 2 rows of seats on each side, and I sat on the left side. I sat down. They told us to buckle up, and it was the first time ever that I felt hope. Because I grew up during the war, and I guess, what does a 5-year-old kid feel like, in feeling hope? But I just remember I felt like, wow, we don't have to run anymore. We don't have to run anymore, because we did a lot of running during the war. We ran from city to city as the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese were coming down toward the south. And I remember we spent a lot of time sleeping. I slept underneath my bed. We never slept on top of our beds. We always sleep underneath, because at night, when you look outside the window, there's flashes of light. And there was shooting and there was fighting outside. So we always slept underneath our beds, because I always had that fear that the roof would collapse when there's fighting. So that's kind of like my childhood growing up. But that helicopter, oh boy, that gave us, I felt so hopeful getting in that helicopter as a 5-year-old kid. That helicopter, the back came up, it flew up, and I saw the city around me. And then it got higher, and then I saw the forest. It was all green, and then it flew over the water. I didn't know where it was going. It flew over the ocean, and it landed on the USS Midway. The aircraft carrier, that's down in San Diego right now, right? Yeah, so I was on deck on the Midway, April 29th, 1975. I stood on deck there all afternoon, and I watched other helicopters land that were Vietnamese helicopters with Vietnamese pilots, because they knew the war was ending. They knew that they were losing the country, so they tried to escape. So I saw these Vietnamese helicopters land. The pilot gets out, the family gets out, and then I watch everyone push the helicopters into the water. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen those clips. Yeah, I stood there. It was in front of me. I stood there and watched helicopters being pushed into the water over the aircraft carriers, and did that all afternoon. And then after that, later that day, they put us into a private Ryan landing craft. You know those little amphibious landing crafts that the Marines go on? So they put a whole bunch of us refugees into these landing crafts. And so it departed from the Midway. So I felt like sardines, like hundreds of people, and the thing is like this in the water in the middle of the ocean. And so I didn't know where we were going, but what happened was we ended up meeting up in the middle of the ocean with a transport ship. And there was a transport ship, and I remember jumping from the landing craft to the side of the ship and then climbing up the ropes. And then I guess 5-year-old, I wasn't too scared, but I was kind of scared, because it was like this with the waves. And you had to wait till the waves are right, when the landing craft's right next, and then you jump over and you grab the ropes on the side of the ship. And so we did that, and we slept on top of the landing of the transport ship, just on deck. Slept on top, lived on top for a few days. Took us to the island of Guam. Anyone heard of the island of Guam? So U.S. Air Force Base was there. U.S. Air Force Base was there. And spent some time there watching the planes take off and land. Lived in those half-dome, what do you call it, Quonset huts, and ate chow with the military. We weren't allowed, because we were war refugees, we weren't allowed to enter the U.S. unless we had a sponsor. Unless we had a sponsor. And so, you know, we didn't have a sponsor. So we lived on the island for a little bit of time. And then one day, we had a sponsor. Somebody told us, "You're being sponsored." And it was a church in Seal Beach. It was a church in Seal Beach. It was actually my first introduction to Christianity. I grew up Buddhist. And I was like, wow, you know. And there was a lady, her name was Marjorie Christensen. She lived inside the globe in Seal Beach. It was Leisure World. They had a big old globe that spins. So she lived in there, and we called her Grandma. And so because we had a sponsor, they flew us from Guam to El Toro base, where at that time there was it was an airport, right, in El Toro. So I got off at the base, 5-year-old kid, and put us on a bus and took us to Oceanside, Marine Corps Camp Pendleton. So Camp Pendleton built a bunch of large tents. They made a refugee camp out of that in 1975. Was anyone around during that time? I don't know, a few of you? Do you remember the tents there or what they did? But yeah, we lived inside the tents there for a while, and until we were able to leave Camp Pendleton, and we went and we lived in an abandoned YWCA. It was all shuttered up, so I think we were kind of illegal at that time. I'm not sure we were allowed in there, but it was in Long Beach, and I was 5 years old, and I started kindergarten, and I guess that's kind of my story, and I guess it's one reason why now I go back to the third world to try to give back, because I feel so blessed to be given this opportunity as an American now, and the freedom that we have and the opportunities that we have that no other country in the world currently offers. So yeah, we are so grateful for veterans. Thank you for your service. And when I was 18, I signed up for the Marines. So I went down to MCRD and did some boot camp and all that, spent a few years. But that was kind of my route and my story. And somehow it led to natural supplements. I'm not sure how it led up to here, but anyway. You guys ready to hear about natural supplements? All right. You were given handouts, right? What do you got in these handouts? I think one of the handout is a natural supplement handouts. It has like what, 12 different things in it? Right? Right. So there's a natural supplement handouts, and you can read that later. You don't have to go through that now. But I wanted to actually give you the natural supplements that have been shown and published in clinical trials to be beneficial, because there is a lot of stuff out there in the market now, right? A lot of stuff. Some of the stuff have science behind it, and some just have good marketing behind it. And you got to know the difference, don't you? Between good science and good marketing. So that's what this list is, supplements for brain health. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in it, 12 different things. And we added a few additional things, some supplements for pain management and supplements for GI health and different things of that sort that are in there for you. And again, you can read that later, because you'll probably remember maybe half of that stuff, and I remember even less than half of that stuff on there. But the way to use this natural supplements things is when you see marketing of products, it just says like brain health, or it says, maximize your brain, or whatever it is. I want you to look at the ingredients. I want you to look at the ingredients, okay? Most of these products have little ingredients of what exactly it is. And I want you to see if you can find these ingredients in this list we have given you. Because the list that we've given you are the list that has probably the highest number of clinical studies to support the health of the brain in these ingredients, okay? Because again, there's a lot of stuff out there and it's hard to know what works and what doesn't, right? It's just, if one product has better marketing than another product, I mean, who knows, right? Look at the ingredients and that will be like a little guide for you of what you can use. But what's even more important than supplements, I believe, is that when you hear the word supplements, they should be just supplemental, right? They should be supplemental to your food. I believe that your food should be your medicine. Your food should be your medicine. More than just popping a whole bunch of pills, right? To supplement stuff. If you eat the right food and you make the right choices in your diet, that's going to be where your medicine's at. Supplements are just supplements, aren't they? They're supposed to supplement, not be the primary thing that's going to protect this. Right? Makes sense so far? And I'm going to go over with you food and diet and things that will harm your brain and things that may protect your brain. So that's lesson number one. That's really the most important lesson, is to allow what we choose to eat every day to brain health our brain, right? To optimize our brain function. And that can be done. So check this out. This was a study published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. This was just in January this year. Look at the title of this thing. It says, over-the-counter supplement intervention to prevent cognitive decline. What that means is over-the-counter supplements to help with memory loss in Alzheimer's, right? So there was actually a search of all the different studies on natural supplements, and it was published this past January. So, quick question. Can we really do a scientific study to prove that a particular supplement can cure Alzheimer's or can help specifically with Alzheimer's? Is that possible when you're doing a study on a supplement? Do you know if that's possible or not possible? Right? So, do you know what these guys concluded? After reviewing the different studies that shows over-the-counter supplements to try to help with memory, these folks concluded correctly, actually. These folks concluded that there is insufficient evidence to show that any supplement will cure anything. Insufficient evidence. And I'll tell you why. It's not because the supplements do not work. It is because when you do a scientific study, you are focusing on one thing, like the supplement, right? And then you have to control the entire environment around you to collect this one data. The difficulty with doing a study on natural supplement, or any supplement in general, is that how do you control the rest of your diet when you're just popping this one thing every day? Right? Does that make sense? So if I'm eating the best supplement that exists on earth on a daily basis, but at the same time, my 3 meals a day are like just, really bad, trashy meals. I'm drinking, a pint of vodka a day, right? I'm drinking a pint of vodka a day, but I'm popping this one supplement every day. right? Is that supplement going to help me? Most likely not, right? Because it's a supplement. It's very difficult to do clinical trials of natural supplement because they'll tell you to take the supplement every day, but how do you control everything else a person takes? I mean, some person may have a great healthy diet, and others may be drinking a pint of, of vodka a day. That's why it's difficult to really do a supplement study. So what we can say in these studies is that we cannot prove that one supplement will cure a disease because we cannot control the environment around that person other than them taking the supplement, right? We cannot control well. But what we can say is we can see associations. We can see associations. Although we cannot prove that A is going to cure B, we see associations where patients who are taking A, right, we're seeing that they have better memory. There's an association between them. We just cannot say that this is the proof. That's why it's really difficult to do a supplement clinical trial, right? But it doesn't mean there hasn't been clinical trials showing positive associations, and those are the ones that are in your handouts. We see the associations between improved memory, improved brain health, improved whatever by taking these supplements. Okay? Associations are there, but making a proof to link things almost impossible in a clinical trial. Does that make sense so far? Right? So, whenever you hear a claim that taking this will cure that, that's a red flag for you. Remember that. Right? Because we cannot control the environment of clinical trials, especially when it comes to supplement. We can see associations. No one can actually do a direct proof unless you're doing it on a rat where you can control everything else around that rat, right? You know what to feed it, what not to feed it, things of that sort. So that's different. So that's my thing on clinical trials and supplements. Fourth leading cause by 2030 in the US is predicted by the World Health Organization. Alzheimer's, fourth leading cause of death. Currently in Orange County, Alzheimer's is the third leading cause of death. Third leading cause of death in Orange County right now. Crazy epidemic, isn't it? Crazy epidemic. Why is that? Right? We're going to go into that. Let me show you a brain. How many of you guys have had these brain scans? Right? This is a PET scan, not available to the general public. Well, it is available if you pay cash for it. It's about $4,000 to $5,000. If you participate and if you're a candidate in the programs that we do currently, we actually do it for free at no cost. This is brain scans showing patients who are normal and patients who have, what do you call it? What builds up? Amyloid plaque. You guys are good. Dang. Right? There's different types of, there's plaques, there's amyloid, there's tau proteins. This is a brain of a patient who has Alzheimer's. See the difference on how it's lit up? Right? The red, the orange. This is what we see when we scan your brain. It's going to look like that or it's going to look like this. We're either going to see amyloid plaque or we won't see amyloid plaque. And for those who have the plaque, we have opportunities to offer some hope to get rid of the plaque. So what causes these amyloid plaque? Anyone know? Diet, yes. Inflammation. Genes, yes. Right, so all correct. Diet, nutrition, which is where supplements come in, and food, right, play a role in creating plaques. Somebody talked about inflammation. Huge role in causing plaque. Somebody said genes, genetics, Yes, that plays a role as well. And by the way, if you're interested, we offer genetic testing in my office at no cost. If you're a candidate for genetic testing, we'll offer that to you at no cost. And we'll give you the results in the next day. It's a little swab of your cheek. Get a little DNA from there, and we'll have results next day. And we do that not just to say, hey, you got the gene, have a great day, right? We do it because we actually have a prevention program if you have the gene through clinical trials. So this is a brain filled with plaque, contributed by what we eat. Contributed by what we eat, our food choices. Contributed by inflammation, and contributed by genetics. Quick question about inflammation. Is inflammation a good thing or a bad thing? I hear both good and bad. Why is it good? It lets you know? Okay. So if if I had the flu, right? One of the first symptoms would be a fever, right? A fever is simply inflammation, isn't it? A fever is when the immune system, which creates inflammation, when the immune system is exposed to something that it doesn't like a virus, a bacteria, a toxin, right? Something foreign that it does not recognize, it views it as threatening to your body. If immune system's first response is what? Inflammation. Inflammation is the first response to protect itself against something foreign, something it doesn't recognize, something that it views as threatening. So inflammation is natural. It's part of your immune system's way of defending itself. So not a bad thing. But why does it cause this? Right? If inflammation is good, then what's going on here? Too much for too long. So when I have that fever, what if I had the fever every day of the month? Is that a good thing or bad thing? Bad, right? If that fever was every day of the month, then that inflammation is no longer protecting itself. That inflammation is starting to turn in and harm myself. Okay? Inflammation occurs everywhere in different organs of our body. We give it different names, but it's the core disease among many things. Okay? And I'm going to tie this all into your diet and nutrition and supplements. It's the core disease because, let me give you some examples. Inflammation of the lungs. What do I call it? Asthma. Allergic asthma is simply inflammation of your lungs. Did you know that? When you have asthma, it's simply your immune system not liking something that it was exposed to, whether it's cold-induced asthma, exercise-induced asthma, right? Something that the immune system doesn't like, so it creates inflammation, which causes mucus production, which causes you to wheeze. So asthma is simply inflammation, isn't it? I just gave it a different name, that's all I did. What do you call inflammation of the skin? I heard dermatitis. Eczema, that's inflammation of the skin. Psoriasis is the inflammation of the skin, right? Acne, right? All I did was I gave it different names, didn't I? It's the same core cause, inflammation, right? Just a different organ system, the skin. What do I call inflammation of the GI tract? Indigestion? Gastritis is inflammation of the stomach. Have you heard of Crohn's disease? Crohn's disease is simply inflammation of your intestines, right? Have you heard of ulcerative colitis? Ulcerative colitis is simply inflammation of the large intestine, right? There you go again, inflammation causing diseases. All I did was give it different names, didn't I? What happens when there's inflammation of your heart? Anyone know? Inflammation of the heart, right? Yeah, well, there's pericarditis, that's inflammation of the lining of the heart, right? Inflammation of the cardiovascular system. The heart system causes plaque buildup, which causes atherosclerosis. Coronary artery disease, inflammatory, which is why we check a blood test often. In patients who have heart disease, we check a CRP level, C-reactive protein, which is an indicator for heart disease. And the CRP level is an inflammation marker. So even in heart disease, there's inflammation involved. Isn't that crazy? I mean, why do we give it all these different names? Why don't we just call it inflammation of this and that, right? It's probably because we get to bill higher or something, I don't know, right? Specialist names. So inflammation of the brain, what do I call that? I call it Alzheimer's. Didn't I just give it a different name? Right? Didn't I just give it a different name? I call it Alzheimer's. Because how do we know? We know because when we do autopsies of patients who have Alzheimer's, not only do we see all this plaque in their brain, right, the orange plaque, we see tons and tons of inflammation cells inside the brain. Inside the brain, inflammation is involved. Okay? So that's kind of a little bit of a background for you with Alzheimer's disease and the causes and inflammation and how it's all connected with that. Okay, this news is getting worse, isn't it? We should have red wine here. Where do we get inflammation from? Take a look at these guys. Where do we get inflammation from? Sugar. Diabetics have double the risk of Alzheimer's compared to non-diabetics. Isn't that crazy? And the scary thing about this is 2/3 of Americans, 2 out of 3 Americans, are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. 2/3 of us are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Sugar, inflammation, red meat. Red meat. How many of you guys like a medium rare steak like I do? When you eat your medium rare steak, right, are you just eating a medium rare steak? What else are we eating? Fat? Yeah? What else are we eating? What do we give that cow? I heard the word hormones. Why would you want to give a cow hormone? They get bigger, faster, plumper, right? Bigger profits, right? So we feed our cows hormones throughout their lifestyle because the cow gets big, fast, bigger profits, right? So when I'm eating a medium rare steak, I'm not just eating a medium rare steak, right? Inflammation. I'm eating hormones. What else do we give our cows besides hormones? Antibiotics. Why would we give antibiotics to our cows?
So they don't get sick and you can use the milk longer.
They don't get sick. You can use milk longer, right? You can milk them longer. So we give our cows antibiotics throughout their lives because, I mean, who wants a sick, dead cow? Less profits, right? So when I'm eating this medium rare steak, I'm not just eating a medium rare steak. I'm eating antibiotics. I'm eating hormones. I'm eating whatever the cow ate. Does it tell you what the cow ate on the label? Sometimes it does. It says grass-fed or something like that, right? We just don't know if that grass was sprayed or not with pesticide. Because if they tell you grass-fed, do they tell you if it's sprayed or not? Right? So when I'm eating red meat, right? I'm eating hormones, I'm eating pesticides, I'm eating antibiotics, and when all this stuff gets into my system, right? When it gets digested and it gets into my system, and my immune system recognizes and sees these hormones and antibiotics and pesticides floating around, what does the immune system do when it sees something that is threatening? Inflammation. Do you see the connection? Inflammation, pro-inflammatory. Yeah.
Is there any meat available that doesn't?
You can get organic stuff. Organic, as you know, is going to be relatively safer than non-organic, but at the same time, it's much pricier. Okay, so inflammation is how the connection is. Cheese is pro-inflammatory. Real bad news, right? Fried foods, fast foods, butter, margarine. Is this the American diet I just talked about? If this is the American diet, then does that explain why Alzheimer's is an epidemic? Does that make sense to you? By the way, why is sugar bad? Causes inflammation, spikes your insulin? So when I eat something sweet, right? When I eat something sweet, what happens to my blood sugar? It goes up real high, right? What does the body make to chase and bring that blood sugar down? It makes insulin, right? It makes insulin. So I eat something sweet, my typical American diet, sugar goes up, insulin goes up. Insulin does what to the sugar? It brings it down, right? Insulin brings the sugar down, but sometimes the sugar goes down way too fast. And when it goes down fast, what are some of the symptoms that I would have again? Sometimes I get tired and dizzy, but one of the symptoms of low sugar is hunger. Hunger, which means I have to eat again. So what happens is I eat something sweet, sugar goes up, I have a sugar crash, right? From insulin going up. I get hungry again, which means I eat again. And when I eat again, I don't necessarily pick the right choices of food. I may pick something that's not healthy, and so my sugar spikes up. And when my sugar spikes up, what happens to the insulin? It goes up again, which causes the sugar to go down again, and right? So this is what happens all day, because we eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks in between, doesn't it? As a matter of fact, our sugar is always spiking based on our diet, and the pancreas keeps making insulin all the time. What happens is this insulin never gets a break from going down, does it? It's always high. It never gets a break from going down. And when the insulin level is always high, the body is exposed to it all the time. When the body is exposed to it all the time, what does the body do to that? It starts to ignore the insulin. We call that insulin resistance. Ever heard of insulin resistance? Insulin resistance comes right before diabetes. Most of us are walking around with insulin resistance. Our insulin no longer works well, which leads to diabetes. That's how we get diabetes. Our body never has a break. The insulin level is always high. The body ignores it. And the problem with this is insulin does more, a lot more, than just bringing down blood sugar. Insulin does a lot more than that. Do you know what else insulin does? Insulin goes into your cells and it triggers multiple reactions. And those multiple reactions are reactions that actually protect your brain. It protects your brain. So when insulin is being ignored by the body, because it's always high, because we're always eating the wrong things, then insulin no longer protects your brain. When it no longer protects your brain, Alzheimer creeps up. Do you see the connection between diabetes and Alzheimer's? Insulin is not working because we're always making it work. It gets ignored. And not only that, when your blood sugar is always high, right, because of our diet, right, the sweets, the desserts, the pasta, the rice, the breads, the pizzas, right, it's basically the American diet. When the blood sugar is always high, what happens is the sugar that's floating around in our bloodstream, glucose, right, we call it glucose, we pee it out, makes you pee more, but at the same time, all this extra sugar, it starts to tag on to other proteins and cells floating around the blood. It tags onto it. It's like hitchhiking. Like you got a protein flying around, right, in the blood. The sugar attaches to it, so now it's like a little tail, like a sugar tail going behind it. Sugar is attaching to everything. And when the sugar attaches to everything, there's a name for that. We call it the N-glycation product or process, right? N-glycation process. It changes, when the sugar attaches to everything, it changes the original structure of that protein. It changes the original structure of those cells. So now the immune system is like, hey, I no longer recognize you. You got a tail. You got sugar attached to you. You know, you're no longer something I recognize. And when the immune system doesn't recognize something, what does it do? Inflammation. Are you seeing the connection now? We are what we eat. Right? We are what we eat. Inflammation, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all connected with that. By the way, something really interesting. Did you know that the plaque gets removed as well? There's a process of plaque production and plaque removal that goes on all the time. But it gets removed more when we're doing what? When we're sleeping, right? At night, when we're sleeping, that process becomes more efficient, more plaque removal. And there's an enzyme that removes that plaque from the brain, and is connected to diabetes. When you have insulin floating around, and a lot of it, the body removes the insulin so that the new insulin can replace the old ones, right? The old insulin gets removed. What do we call the name of that, that enzyme that degrades, insulin? Does anyone know? Glutathione? No. So there's an enzyme that degrades the insulin. There's a name to it. It's called the insulin degrading enzyme. That's exactly what it's called. And so if insulin degrading enzyme is so busy removing insulin, guess what the other function that it does? Guess what else it degrades? It degrades plaque in the brain. So when we are eating stuff, keeping our insulin degrading enzyme so busy, degrading insulin based on the food that we eat, that enzyme doesn't have time to degrade amyloid plaque. So amyloid plaque builds up. Are you seeing all the connections? Right? So this here, sugar, red meat, right? You understand sugar now. You understand toxins from what we eat. Cheese, the fermentation process doesn't make it healthy. Fried foods, butter and margarine. Yes?
Does cooking take care of what the cow ate if you cook the meat done?
If you killed the cow and cooked it real good, does it take care of what, do you destroy the antibiotics and the hormones and all that in there? You do destroy it, but the cooking process or the frying process itself is not good. It denatures a lot of the proteins and actually promotes, which is why fried foods and fast foods down here is not good because of that process of cooking. Okay, it promotes inflammation as well, but in a different way. All right, let me show you something interesting, guys. So this is what we were taught in med school. The inflammation pathway looks really complex, doesn't it? And it has to be complex because if it wasn't complex, we can't bill as high, right? So inflammation pathway starts up here, goes down here, arachidonic acid is here, and it breaks out to here, it breaks out to here, it breaks down to here. Everything out here are inflammatory cells that causes inflammation. That's the pathway for inflammation, okay? And this is also the pathway that causes pain. Okay? Chronic pain and inflammation goes through that pathway. Arthritis, different types of chronic pain is caused by this pathway as well. It's an interesting pathway because I'll give you a little hint of how drugs are made. The pharmaceutical companies, we look at this pathway, we study it really well, and then we say, what drug can we make to block this thing here? And we'll call that a drug. What drug can we make to block this thing down here, right? And that becomes a drug. And what can we do to block this over here? That's how we block inflammation, by making drugs to block all these arrows, right? Make sense so far? And the other interesting thing you should know is something here is called endocannabinoid. Anyone ever heard of that? Endocannabinoid is a whole system where that inhibits inflammation and blocks inflammation. This system is why folks in the, what do you call it? What kind of club is it here? The CBD club or the medical marijuana club or cannabis club? Is that you guys over there? Is there there's a cannabis club here, right? There's like how many people part of that cannabis club? Last time I read, there was 800 people. The largest club in Laguna Woods is the Weed Club? But I know for a fact, because I have patients who are part of that club, I know for a fact that patients are part of that club not because they want to get high, not because they're potheads, but because the cannabis or the CBD component, right, of medical marijuana, the CBD component of medical marijuana interacts here to block pain. That's how we get pain control. Right here, that's where cannabis is. Okay? That's a little side tangent for you with that. But that's the science behind medical marijuana and the science behind CBD. How many of you guys heard of CBD oil and different things and you rub it on for pain? Does it work? Right? Oh, Hempworth is here. Right? So there you go. That's where that science comes from. It's right there, the endocannabinoid system. The CBD attaches to the receptors of that system and blocks inflammation. Make sense? So let me show you really quick. This is part of the inflammation pathway. I made it look bigger. Aspirin's here. Your Advils, Aleve are all right here, ibuprofens. Have you heard of Celebrex? It's an anti-inflammatory. It blocks it right down here, right? Over here you have a Singulair for asthma, right, and allergies. It blocks it down here. Colchicine for gout. It blocks it over here. So this is an example of how drug companies make all these meds, and all they do is they block the different pathways in that big picture. Isn't that cool? Kind of cool, right? But what if we can decrease inflammation through our food and supplements? Food and supplements. What if we can do that without taking a whole bunch of extra pills? Wouldn't that be even better? Take a look here. Clinical studies have shown turmeric will block inflammation down here. Red pepper or capsaicin, dietary, right? Ginger, anti-inflammatory over here. You got rosemary, which blocks inflammation down the leukotriene areas. Have you heard of feverfew? Right? It's a plant. Turmeric is here, onions over here. We've studied this stuff. It blocks inflammation at different path in that big old inflammation pathway. Wouldn't this be a better picture than the other picture? If only we knew the types of food to eat to do the same thing that the drugs will do. Right? If only we knew, because it goes through the same pathway. We've studied it. We've studied it. It goes through the same pathway of where certain foods will block inflammation along the chain. So rather than, Advils, Aleve, Vicodins, Percocets, Oxycontin, right? If we chose the right types of food to increase eating on, and if we chose the foods to avoid that are pro-inflammatory, right? Let your food be your medicine. Let your food be your medicine. How many of you guys want a copy of this? Okay. I got to figure out how to do that. So what if we cut out red meat in our diet? You saw how I talked about red meat, medium rare steaks, things of that sort. What if we cut that out? What would it do to Alzheimer's? Here you go. Published in 2016, 2 years ago, the Journal of the College of Nutrition, 2016. What this little graph shows is that it looks at eating animal food, which is red meat, and it correlates it with Alzheimer's. The word LOAD means late onset Alzheimer's disease. It means, you get Alzheimer's when you're older, right? That's what that means. And what this shows is on this graph here, it shows you Alzheimer's prevalence, right? How many people are getting Alzheimer's? So if you go higher on the graph, it's worse. What this graph here shows the supply of red meat that we have. The supply of red meat that we have. This studies shows 10 different countries. It plotted out 10 different countries, the prevalence of Alzheimer's in those countries compared to the availability of red meat in those countries. And it plotted out these little dots, 1 country, 2 country, 3 country, 4 country, 5. So 10 different dots. And the correlation is if you have more access to red meat, your country has a much higher prevalence of Alzheimer's. Isn't that crazy? There is a direct correlation here, folks, between eating certain types of red meat and Alzheimer's based on the countries you live in and their availability of red meat. Basically, the Western countries that have money, the rich countries where we can afford steaks, are the countries where we see all the Alzheimer's at. Interesting graph, right? So if you want to cut down your risk for Alzheimer's, what do you need to avoid buying when you go to the grocery store? Right? Right? So if you went from here to here, right? Let's say you cut your red meat by 50%, and you ate 50% less red meat. It'll put you down here where you see a direct proportion of 50% less risk for Alzheimer's. Isn't that crazy? We are what we eat. Let me show you something else that's interesting to back that up. Plant-based diet. A plant-based diet is basically a diet that minimizes red meat, right? It's a diet that's the Mediterranean diet, and it's a diet that promotes fish, which is healthy, and poultry, which is better than steak, right? We have shown that those who are on a plant-based diet will reverse all the risk factors for Alzheimer's. And the same risk factors for Alzheimer's are the same risk factors for heart disease. They share the same risk factors. So when you cut down your amount of meat intake, you can reduce diabetes by looking at the hemoglobin A1C that's been measured. You can reduce blood pressure. You can reduce obesity, right? Heart disease can be reduced, cholesterol can be reduced. Here are the clinical trials that has been published to study all that. But it basically boils down to a decision on what we eat. Food, nutrition, and supplements, right? Here's another study. Incidence of dementia and intake of animal products. Have you heard of a Seventh-day Adventist? Where do they live? Loma Linda, right, Loma Linda. So this is a study, actually, in Loma Linda. It says Loma Linda here. They looked at about 3,000 folks who live in the area, and they looked at the prevalence of dementia. And the one thing with Loma Linda and Seventh-day Adventists is that they are primarily vegetarians. They're vegetarians. I know because I had a lot of veggie burgers out there when I was training out in Loma Linda for internal medicine. Interesting study. One of the conclusions, it was really interesting. The subjects who ate meat, okay, were more than twice as likely to become demented compared to their vegetarian counterparts. Is that not crazy? Yeah.
We got a question to us. Us red meat cheeseburger people, how often can we have a cheeseburger or steak in a month with little or no damage?
The less the better. What if we cut sugar out of our diet, guys? Imagine what that would do in lowering our Alzheimer's risk, right? Study here showing the relationship between Alzheimer's and diabetes. Basically, it says that Alzheimer's is considered type 3 diabetes these days because it's so prevalent. You have type 2 diabetics, right? Which means, most of us get that. Alzheimer's is now labeled as type 3 diabetes. So prevalent. Here's a whole list of clinical trials linking diabetes with Alzheimer's here as well. Yeah.
Why don't you slash sugar carbohydrates?
Yes.
That would be much more honest.
Sugar is carbohydrate, right? Carbohydrate.
If I'm just looking at what you have, it doesn't say that.
Right. Well, carbohydrate, you're absolutely correct. You guys know what carbs break down to when you eat it? Breaks down to sugar. But simple carbs breaks down to sugar. White bread, white rice, pasta, right? We have complex carbs as well, which is different. Like apples. Did you know that vitamin D deficiency is linked to Alzheimer's? I got 4 studies here for you. Study number 1, study number 2, study number 3, study number 4. 4 published studies showing that if your vitamin D level is low, you're at risk for Alzheimer's. That's where supplementation comes in, right? Unless you're going to go out and get more sun or eat more food with vitamin D that's fortified. Okay, real quick, just to let you know. I bring specifically vitamin D up because I test vitamin D levels in my patients, and 80% of them are vitamin D deficient. It's kind of crazy because we live in Orange County, so I don't understand why. You're out in the sun all the time. Yes, yes.
With all due respect, I understand that some of the chickens are almost fed. One of the things we put up range chickens, and when you go to the range, I don't know that it has to be sprayed with some kind of spray that could harm you. And the fish in the ocean is polluted, the rivers are polluted, the lakes are polluted.
I know. Yeah, everything kind of kills you. You just got to pick the least of your evils. Or, yeah, but stay vegetarian, or not necessarily vegetarian, because I eat meat, right? But minimize your red meat intake as much as you can. So to answer your question, the answer is fasting. Don't eat. Once a year only, huh? So I don't have a lot of time to go through all this with you. But I wanted to show you that there are some studies that shows that intermittent fasting is good for your health and good for the brain. But I'm not promoting that you starve, okay? That's like another lecture in itself that we have seen. These are the 11 or 12 supplements that's in your, that you have in your piece of paper. Is that right? That I got for you. So when you look at these supplements, they are supplements because they're either antioxidants which become anti-inflammatory, right? They're supplements because they tackle the root cause. They're anti-inflammatories, or they improve circulation, blood flow up to your brain, right? Resveratrol, very strong antioxidant, found in the skin of red grapes. Fish oil, you know about. Caffeine is a vasodilator if you drink not too much or things of that sort. Half of this stuff you've never heard of. Phosphatidylserine you've never heard of, acetyl L-carnitine. This stuff has the most research behind it. You just never heard of it, unless you actually know what to look for. Glutathione, turmeric we talked about. Those are the supplements. Do you want to hear, so if you followed this diet, what you would do is you would stop new production, right? You would minimize new production of plaque. Does that make sense? My question is, what do you do with the plaque that's already there? Want to hear what we do with it? Want to hear how to remove it? I'll show you how. What is the date on this? July 25th, 2018, New York Times. New Alzheimer's drug slows memory loss in early clinical trial. What we do in my office, as most of you know, is we have programs called clinical trials where we use a class of medication that is removing plaque from your brain. We do it for free at no cost if you're a candidate, okay? And this is that class of medication. Have you heard of immunotherapy? Immunotherapy is used successfully in cancer treatment. Immunotherapy is when we train your own immune system, to go after the cancer cells. So that rather than chemotherapy that destroys everything, right? Chemo destroys the good guys, the bad guys, everything gets killed. Immunotherapy goes directly for the cancer cell. We are making a lot of progress in cancer treatment these days. Immunotherapy is allowing folks to live much longer. I have stage 4 breast cancer patients who are still around for the last 10 years. Stage 4, using immunotherapy. Right? So we're getting a lot of success with immunotherapy. What we are doing now is we are bringing immunotherapy over to Alzheimer's treatment. If you're a candidate for that in my office, right, you get this brain scan to see if the plaque is there or not there, right? Oh, by the way, how do you know if you're a candidate? That little blue slip that you have, that little half sheet that you have in front of you, you can see me at no cost. You can see me at no cost in the office. I just do free consultations, and you put down your name and a phone number, and you turn it in to Diane in the back, and then we'll call you. We will see if you're a candidate for that PET scan to see if there's amyloid or not. If there's no amyloid, I would just congratulate you. You don't have Alzheimer's, you're not at risk for Alzheimer's for like the next 10 years. Because it takes like 20 years for these things to build up before it causes symptoms. But if we see amyloid, we can now offer hope. Published results, we can now offer hope. This is July 5th, right? Eisai Biogen announced positive top-line results in the analysis of their immunotherapy medication. And when it says positive results, what it means is that we can remove amyloid plaque from your brain now, which is what we're doing. How to stop it, and now how to remove it. Exciting news. This is not available the last few years. This has only been available in the last few years since the brain scans have been available. And that's only been around for the last 5-6 years that's FDA approved. So this is all new stuff, guys, right? Here it is, Alzheimer's. This was 2 months ago. This therapy with this long name reduces brain level of amyloid in the brain, is shown to be safe and well tolerated in Alzheimer's news today. By the way, this long name here, that's actually in my office. We offer that to patients who have plaque in their brains. So if you're interested in how to remove plaque, or even if the plaque is there, come see us for a consultation at no cost. That little blue half sheet is what you do. Because if I find plaque in your brain, I want to remove it before there's damage. Before there's damage. Why wait for the damage to occur, right? So now you know how to slow down or stop new plaques from diet, from supplements, and this is how we remove existing plaques. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Trin. That's a lot of information, and it was a lot of information that is not well known. So I encourage you all to go back and schedule a visit to get more information about this. It's really amazing. And when I just heard about, I can't pronounce it, it starts with an E. How does it say, how do you pronounce the E drug? The E drug, Eclectin? The E drug, that's what we're gonna call it. That drug is the most hope we've had in the medical community in a long time. Yes, ma'am. Hold on, I'm gonna give you the mic and you can ask it to Dr. Trin. Hold on one second. Okay. We have one more question for Dr. Trin. I'm gonna go give her.
Yes, questions?
Okay, and now is the time to ask. I'm glad we have, because how often do we get to ask our doctor questions? Not only if we pay for it and, hold on.
My experience tells me to question something that I've never heard anyone mention about our bodies. I think there's a lot in our individual bodies that fights a lot of bad illnesses or hunger or anything. We have lived, millions of us have lived for years with hardly any food or completely missing anything that everybody is supposed to have. And I'm sure that, I figure there has to be something within our body that we don't know about yet. And doesn't anyone suspect that there may be a lot of things in our body that fights, that our own body will fight it? And maybe God will help.
So is your question, it's more of a comment?
Did anyone ever check that out and see if there aren't any things in our body that we don't know anything about?
Okay, I'll leave that to Dr. Trin. Is there anything in our bodies that we don't know about that can assist us?
Well, if we don't know about it, then we probably don't know if it's there. We're learning stuff about our bodies all the time, and that's why we continue to do clinical research. But yeah, we learned that the more natural things we can employ, such as our food and our decision to eat and not eat this and that, makes a big difference to our bodies.
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard that the band 2401, which is the one that has been making the news, is only for early onset or for the first stages. If you're advanced beyond or 5 and beyond, this is not going to work for you at all.
Yes, so in clinical trials, we have different medications and they work on different stages of Alzheimer's. There's like the early stage of Alzheimer's and then the more advanced stage of Alzheimer's. It goes through a phase, right? And the mild stage of Alzheimer's, you know, it can go up to 10 years. You can walk around with mild Alzheimer's and miss the diagnosis because when it's mild, we tend to kind of blame it on getting older, right? But the best time to do these clinical trials is when you can still have a conversation with me because the damage that is done in the brain as the plaque eats up, right, your brain, the damage as it's done, we cannot bring those dead brain cells back. And so the best time is, you know, is now, really. Okay? Oh, those deposits, those blue things, we'll take it from you.
Here, we'll take these. If anybody has their form filled out, we can come by and take them. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes?
Can you give us the name of the immunotherapy medication that possibly we can buy if we don't see you?
That you can buy if you don't see me?
No, if
Oh.
we can't see you, can we buy this immunotherapy medication that you mentioned?
Yes, these are currently not available for sale in the open market because these are basically drugs that are being tested in clinical trials. So they're not like you can't go to Walmart to get them yet. Once the Chinese copy it, you can, but not yet. Not yet. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Does the Alzheimer's and the Parkinson's share similar problems?
Good question. Does Alzheimer's and Parkinson's share similar problems? Yes, the majority of, or not the majority, but many patients who have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's actually are also at risk for dementia. The only difference is that they start at different locations in the brain. With Alzheimer's, the damage starts first at a location of the brain called the hippocampus. Ever heard of the hippocampus? The damage starts there. With Parkinson's, the substantia nigra. Different aspects of the brain gets damaged first with dopamine and different things, but it ends up in the same place, memory loss, right? So they both share that, in that nerves are being destroyed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have some more Q&A at the end. But if anybody would like to make an appointment with Dr. Trin, that we got some more. Let's just see Diana in the back. She'll be in with the blue tablecloth, Irvine Clinical Research. So, but we're ready for our next presenter. So I want to tell you a little about Allison because she is so fantastic. So anybody that has memory loss for whatever different reasons, there is a solution right now. There are some solutions that are readily available. And I'm going to introduce Allison from Cognitive Care Solutions. How many of you have heard of Cognitive Care Solutions? Yes, let's give her a big hand.
So depression, anxiety, and stress. I've talked a lot about brain health and what we can do about modifying different risk factors. And I thought I would specifically talk about depression, anxiety, and stress, which many of you have heard me say is one of the risk factors, right? I think this computer is going to cause me some stress. Okay, I don't know why it's not advancing on this computer, but be it as it may. Okay, what is depression? It's a mood disorder that it causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. It affects how you think, how you feel and behave, and can lead to emotional and physical issues. Sometimes you just have the difficulties of getting through the day. Does that sound familiar? So some of you are saying no, which is great, I'm glad, and some of you are saying yep. So Why do I tell you when I do my presentation on modifying different risk factors, why is depression one of those risk factors? How does it relate to brain health? Anybody want to take a stab at the dark? John, you should know this, John. I just have to call this out. I have to call you on this. John's attended my workshops at Florence Sylvester for 2 years now. Anybody want to take a guess? How is depression related to good brain health? Okay, well, I'll tell you. So if you're depressed, is your concentration really good? No, it's not so good probably. And when you compare, you want to make sure that your brain is as healthy, like Dr. Trin was saying, as possible. And depression, stress, and anxiety is definitely related to good brain health, or would be poor brain health, but it's related to the progression of dementia, progression of the disease process. So many times in my office, we treat depression, stress, and anxiety first, and then we see where the baseline is to the memory. Because folks are coming into my office saying, you know, my memory just isn't as sharp as it used to be. I just can't recall those names. I'm forgetting things. I'm leaving my keys around. I just don't feel right. And they're thinking it's all memory, but sometimes it's the depression. And depression, some people think, well, depression, just snap your fingers and get out of it. Come on, what's wrong with you? But it is a disease. And you can't just snap your fingers and have it disappear. Sometimes you have to have medication. Sometimes you have to have medication plus some therapy, psychotherapy. And you have to have some motivation to make some changes in your life. What are the symptoms of depression? So depression may only occur once in a lifetime, or you might have more episodes. Generally speaking, depression is sadness, tearfulness, a feeling of emptiness, hopelessness, angry. Some people get really irritable. You get really cranky. You have a loss of interest. You don't find pleasure in things. Things that you've done for a long time that you've enjoyed, you don't so much anymore. You just don't have that motivation. You have a sleep disturbance. You've heard me talk many times about sleeping and the problems related to that. Some people sleep too much, which is not good, and others don't sleep very well at all. They get maybe an hour of sleep a night. And too much sleep is just as bad for you as not enough sleep. Tiredness and lack of energy, and also some people have a reduced appetite. They don't want to eat, and others eat way too much. And what do they eat? When you have some depression, are you eating kale salad? No. You're eating mashed potatoes, all the comfort food, mashed potatoes, chocolate cake, right? All those things that have comfort in us. And what did Dr. Trin say about all that sugar? It causes inflammation in your brain, quite possibly. So you see how these things are interrelated. Now, anxiety, people have anxiety issues. They get nervous or agitated. They have slower thinking and speaking. That's where the dementia sometimes comes in play. And you self-blame. You blame yourself. You can't concentrate as well, trouble making decisions. Some people become suicidal. I just don't feel like living anymore. This just isn't worth it. And they also have some unexplained physical problems. And just on a side note with this, I believe that this is very closely related to our opioid problem here in America. Because what happens? People go to the doctor and they have backaches. And how many doctors say, I wonder if you have depression. But what do? Yeah, oh, let me give you a prescription of Vicodin or something else. And then what happens? You have to keep taking more and more. I'm not saying that you don't have backaches. I'm not saying that there aren't any physical issues. Of course, I'm sure there are. But sometimes the depression makes that backache feel a lot worse. And if you're not sleeping and you're not eating properly, your physical body is not going to be in the best shape possible. And so your back will hurt more, I guarantee it. But I'll be darned if it's not better to treat the depression than the backaches. Make sense? Okay. So then there's also memory difficulties, personality changes, like I said, physical aches and pains, fatigue, loss of appetite, isolation, and the suicidal thinking of feelings. Isolation is a big issue. And the saddest part about this is that depression is treatable. Okay, what are the causes of depression? There's biological differences. There's physically different changes in the brain. There's brain chemistry. The neurotransmitters are not as effective in treating the mood stability. Hormones are a major issue and can trigger depression, especially when you're pregnant. There's many women here, I'm sure maybe 15% of you had postpartum depression, and then menopause. And that's another issue, is I think depression is not diagnosed very often with menopause. Doctors think that we're just a little bit crazy. And they're not looking at the menopause. There's a correlation between the estrogen and the chemistry in the brain. Okay, and there's also genetics play a part. If you have a history of depression in your family, not always, but it's a possibility that you could have depression as well. If mom had depression or dad, you or your siblings could have depression as well. Complications. Again, if you're eating too much, it leads to obesity, and that leads to heart disease and diabetes. Pain or physical illness. Some people start drinking and self-medicating. Then what happens? You have family conflicts, social isolation, and again, we go back to the suicidal feelings. What are we going to do? Well, we can try to control the stress, figure out what's going on, where that depression is starting from, reach out to family and friends, and get treatment early. And if you do have a history of depression, then it's good to identify that and to make regular doctor's appointments and talk about it. Any questions on that? Okay. I think I'll stop since this is supposed to end at 2. I was going to do a little bit more on anxiety, but I feel like everybody wants to get out of here. Am I wrong, or should I go on, or is this, you want to end here? Okay, let's end. Any questions on depression? Okay, anxiety and stress next time? Good, okay. Really important, depression plays a big role in the diagnosis of dementia. And I would encourage all of you, if you're feeling that you have some depression, anxiety, or overstressed, that you look at that. It may not be dementia. It might be as simple as treating the depression. Okay, thank you.
Woo. Thank you, Allison.
You're welcome.
You know, so we will definitely do a follow-up on this, because I think that here in the village that we do have quite a bit of anxiety and depression issues. I work with social services as a member of Memorial Care all the time, and there is quite a bit of that. And the CCA last year did 2 months at least on depression. I don't know if any of you came to that over at the community center. So our next month we're going to be talking about cardio, but we're also going to we have the Medicare marketplace, and we will be talking about mental health, depression, anxiety, things like that. So this This will be definitely our follow-up for this presentation will be at that time. So at this point, I'd like to welcome you all to go back to the sponsors, spend a little time back there, get some information. We have cognitive care, HempWorks, Memorial Care is here, willing to do blood pressure check, medication reviews. Go back and get that, talk about anything you'd like to talk about. She's a registered nurse, and it would be wise for everybody to take advantage of this opportunity. We also have Chris with Elixir Meds, if you're interested in signing up with Dr. Trin, Irvine Clinical Research, Karen at Healthy Alternatives, and then and that is a Healthy Alternatives. Nikon's been around for many, many years. And we also have Hilo, the Hilo watch. Does anybody wear a Hilo watch? I'm going to get one. And there's a reason for it. And then we'll see. It's very exciting. I think that if you haven't heard about it, go back there and check it out. How many of you have heard of CBD? Okay. CBD is a supplement. And there is a lot of information that's available in our back by HempWorks and Elixir Meds. Please go back and check it out. Don't go, you can do the research on your own, but it's better to talk to the experts. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you next month.